In this video, we're going over gaming on Linux and how Linux is actually starting to pull ahead in a lot of titles. And we're going to show some benchmarks today, which are pretty darn exciting, but not as exciting as what the future holds, because we got some crazy stuff happening in this world of Linux. Like last year, we had Steam Play that came out and said, hey, you can play your Windows titles on Linux, and everybody lost their minds. And then they're like, okay, well, it's mainly most of the titles, probably like 50%, and you have to do a little bit of tinkering here to get them to work. But overall, you still lose a little bit of frames by switching to Linux, and that's what everyone accepted. But today, that all changes. At least it's starting to change, where there's titles out right now that are performing worse on Windows and better on Linux. So I'm going to show a couple articles in this video. Links will be in the description below, but it's pretty big news. There's some benchmarks we're going to go over and talk about some of the new stuff that's happening. So here is the Forbes article made by Jason. He actually went ahead and kind of compared some of the Windows 10 Pop! OS benchmarks to the Windows counterpart. Now, these are obviously a little cherry-picked, but it still illustrates a point. There are literally games out there, both native and non-native games, that run faster and get higher FPS in Linux. So this is downright just surprising. When you go through here, some of the numbers are, some people say, hey, I can't run Linux because of the 20% frame drop. And that's just not true on all titles. So when you come into his actual game quality settings, you go through and say, hey, he did ultra presets on F1 and Dirt Rally, Shadow Tomb Raider, Total War, Hitman 2, and pull up these actual things. And let me zoom in here. You can see that Pop! OS handily beats a lot of these titles. You look at it, Shadow Tomb Raider was about 9 frames ahead. However, Total War, Strange Bridge was even up. Hitman 2 was about 4 frames behind, but that's kind of crazy. Pop! OS literally pulled out ahead of some of these titles, and that's amazing. That's huge for Linux. And he doesn't say, hey, Linux is better than Windows, even though I've said that in the past. He says, no, it's not really the point. It's the fact that they're starting to come ahead. Now, there's one thing he mentions towards the end of the article, how they've slowly gained and almost surpassed Windows in many titles. He actually points out there's a new compiler coming out that Valve just released. It's called AOC, and it's a replacement for LLVM. Now, that's a lot of acronyms to digest, but just know this, it's based on the Mesa drivers that are basically the video drivers that run most of the AMD chips. Now, let's flip over to another article and kind of take a look at this, because we're seeing up to 20% frame increases on Steam Play titles. These are not Linux native games, but Windows native games that Linux is not only beating, but stomping Windows in. So it says, hey, for gaming performance improvement, the compile time is critical. And the new AOC compiler, it reduces the time by almost 50%. Valve explained more about this in this actual community post, and I'll put the links to all these articles down in the description as well. And it says, hey, is there really a performance in Linux? And you go ahead and pull these in. These are completely different games than what Jason in the Forbes article explained. But if you look here, Strange Brigade, which he actually benchmarked at the exact same frame rates, you see with the AOC compiler that is now pulling out ahead. Same with Total War. Rise of the Tomb Raider, which also fell behind in his benchmarks, is actually now coming out ahead. Total War also coming out ahead. Doom considerably coming out ahead. The future is Linux. I've said this for a long time. I even came out with a post saying Linux gaming is better. And what I meant by that is it is getting there if it's not already there. Right now, the usability, having my grandma be able to pick this up and play, would be amazing. But guess what? That's not there yet. There's still some tweaking that needs to be done on the Linux side before the everyman can just go ahead and pick it up. However, someone like me can do a lot of tweaks once I get the game working with a lot of these new compilers and things, I can have better performance on Linux than Windows. So here is the actual 50% time to compile in seconds, which less is better. And as you see, the AOC is almost literally 50% of the LLVM compiler, which we've been using for quite some time now. So huge reduction. And it's not quite complete. It says AOC right now is still working out some of the finishing up stages. I would imagine this is going to hit Main Street probably, hopefully later this year. But I couldn't imagine this taking longer than a year based on a lot of these preliminary results that they've been kind of teasing us with. But it's something we need to actually pay attention to. This is absolutely critical for the Linux community, because how would Windows people respond, especially those power users on Windows, if they knew they were on an inferior product and literally they were sacrificing frames to be on Windows? I guarantee you 90% of those people would be like, I'm going to learn Linux now because I don't want to be dropping frames to stay on a crappy operating system I hate that updates all the time when I don't want it to, when I could be on one that I can actually control. It's huge. So there you have it. I am just extremely over the moon here, and I really mean it. If you're a Windows user that's saying, hey, I'm on Windows because I need to game, what if you said instead, hey, I'm on Windows because that's all I know, and I'm losing frames from being on Windows. My FPS and performance is worse because I'm on Windows, and I don't have nearly the reliability because I'm on Windows. Guess what? That's the reality. Not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, but probably starting this year, maybe at the very latest next year. We're starting to see literally Linux rise above Windows in performance. This is huge, and we're not done. We have compilers coming out. The Linux kernel is becoming a lot faster and able to handle a lot more drivers, a lot more graphical things. We're seeing a lot of advancements. This year is huge. It's already been huge. Not, oh, it's going to be huge because of just the AOC compiler. It's already made so much progress this year. I've already seen such huge leaps and bounds in my frames on my games I'm playing that it's just amazing. And I think this is just huge news for the whole community. I'm surprised no one else has really come out and said all this, because when I said, hey, I'm going to switch to Linux last year, I thought I was going to make a lot more sacrifices than I have made. And anytime I've gone back to Windows, I've become increasingly frustrated with the operating system. And I know I'm not alone. I have an open mind. I'm good for any operating system out there. I don't care if it's Linux, Mac, Windows. I go to whatever is the best thing. And I'm going to tell you right now, Linux is not only the best thing, but it's going to be the best thing by a mile based on everything that's happening. Because all the other operating systems are pulling back and going down in flames. And Linux is the only one not only maintaining the status quo, but improving upon it and giving us more features, more compatibility, more performance, more of everything. So this is huge news, absolutely huge. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, because I'm curious to see how Windows users think of this. Because guess what? The time and the age of Windows and it being the only gaming system out there is over. But a big shout out to my Patreons. Without you, I couldn't make videos like this one. And I'll see you on the next video.